Today, I want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. And the reason why is because recently, 3 emails got leaked by the Democratic Party. And then, basically, the FBI/DOJ decided, well, we're just going to dump out 22,000 emails. Cool. So, needless to say, there's been huge breaking news around all these different emails that have been picked through. Because there are so many of them, they haven't all been sorted through, but this is literally straight from the spigot. So I'm going to try and dive into a video which kind of looks at, okay, what are these letters, emails that have come out? What can we glean from them so far? What are some of the initial things that have been found out? But fully expecting that this is going to continue on for quite some time. And I think part of the reason why it was released was because there were 3 that have already been leaked. But then also, it looks like there is going to be some sort of vote on disclosure with Congress coming back into session, and then the 1 additional Democrat being sworn in, which gave them the 218 votes required to bring it to the floor to vote on. So it's going to be very interesting. I think that what is going to happen, we'll see, right, what happens. That may not ever come out, but I think this is a step in the right direction because obviously with them voting on full disclosure, it has to go past the House, which it looks like they have the votes to be voting on it, and it is not going to be very politically viable to vote against it. So I think it may very well get passed there. It does have to get past the Senate as well, but then it also can be vetoed by the president, in which case it would have to go back to the Senate, and I believe they have to get 60 votes to fully release the Epstein files in the case of a veto, which obviously would happen. But anyway, let's dive into the video, take a look at what has exactly come out, at least what has been found so far, and what we can learn from it. And no sooner did I wrap up this video than I came across this gem, which could totally explain why Trump didn't want this to come out. If you are a believer that Trump had nothing to do with little girls. Very interesting. Between Mark Epstein and Jeffrey in an email back and forth, they're kind of going back and forth. How are you doing? A while back you mentioned that you were pre-diabetic. Has anything changed with that? What is your boy Donald up to now? All good, Bannon with me. And this is while Trump is in office. This is 2018. Next line. From Mark Epstein to Jeffrey Epstein. Ask him if Putin has the photos of Trump blowing Bubba. So think about that. Who is Bubba? Bubba is Bill Clinton. That was his nickname. That was his nickname that he was known as. So I could have been completely wrong on assuming that Trump doesn't want this to come out because he was doing inappropriate things with little girls. If you are willing to believe that he blew Bill Clinton, what would he want to come out less? That he's doing inappropriate things with little girls, or that he blew Bill Clinton? I just had to turn the camera back on and cover this because this completely would blow all of my theories out of the water. Like, what would be more degrading for him than that he blew Bill Clinton? And of course, Trump is obsessed with protecting his persona and his image. He's completely obsessed with that. So of course, if it was going to come out that Trump blew Bill Clinton, then that's just where we are. It all makes so much more sense now. So just take that in context of everything else that I've said in this video. I just couldn't, again, breaking news. As soon as I turn off my cameras, I stumble across this little gem here.
Today we're talking about the 20,000 Epstein files that got released. It's a complicated picture involving a lot of powerful people, but let me just say right up front, this is an ongoing story. There's a lot that's going to be released in the coming days, so just understand we're going to do our best to explain what has been happening, because this story has been full of twists and turns. It starts with the Democrats releasing 3 emails from the Jeffrey Epstein estate. One says that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. A victim spent hours at my house with him. Another says the victim, Mar-a-Lago, Trump says he asked me to resign. Never a member ever, Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine Maxwell to stop. And then the third email is from Michael Wolff talking about Jeffrey Epstein's association with Trump, saying you can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you, or if it looks like he really could win, you could save him generating a debt.
And this is the thing about those emails, right? So I think the reason why the Democrats leaked those 3 was because it makes Trump look bad, right? At least in the first 2. Because it says, oh yeah, Trump was there talking for hours. You know, Trump and Mar-a-Lago's mentioned in there. Yes, okay, he asked Ghislaine to stop, but there's huge redacted portions. And so that is, I think, why they released them in that state. Which is funny because in the 2200 dump that they did, those were actually included in there with less redactions. In the ones released from the DOJ. They were just releasing it because it actually makes Trump look less guilty/bad. But in that, all the things that they did release, there are a lot of them that are still very questionable. But I'll let him continue on and then we can dive into it a little bit more.
Basically implying the idea that Epstein would have some kind of compromising information on Trump. But that was just the start of it, because then after that, the GOP came out swinging and they said Democrats whine about releasing the files, but they only cherry pick when they have them to generate clickbait. You deserve the full truth. And then they released over 20,000 files. Some of it had to do with Trump, some of it did.
And this is the exact example that I'm talking about, where it's blank worked at Mar-a-Lago, which is pretty well known that this is Virginia Dufrey. She was the one that accused Prince Andrew. Trump said that, and that part was blanked out as well, so they didn't want you to know what was going on there. Trump said he asked me to resign, never a member ever. Of course, he knew about the girls and asked Ghislaine to stop. And I think it's probably a fair assessment is that, yes, it was redacted in order to make Trump look more guilty. I mean, he still doesn't look great in this, correct? But yeah, because when it's redacted, your mind just can run wild with like what is behind there. I mean, this is all stuff that we have known in the email, right? Virginia Dufrey worked at Mar-a-Lago. She accused Prince Andrew. And then, you know, he was never a member. Trump asked him to resign. Girls, Ghislaine, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Like, all of this is known. But yeah, when it's redacted, previously known information looks worse. So, yeah, understandable. At least why, I mean, and here's the thing. This is why I think it never really escalated, or they never leaked before, is that I think everyone is implicated. Like, everyone. And so if you did this, where you release 1 or 2 about Trump, well, then the other side is going to come out and just, here you go, drop the bombshell and just nuke everything. And so that, I think, is what was always kind of thought about, right? And it was kind of set up like a mutually assured destruction, where no one could ever leak anything, because then the other side would come out and just chuck a grenade in the bunker and destroy both sides. Again, mutually assured destruction, we're taking you down with us. And so I think this is kind of that, where they're just like, all right, you want to play hardball. And it will be interesting because of who's, and the thing you have to think about is think about who's in power right now. And we're any of the overtly, because again, all this is known. This was all known. So like, okay, they leave that in there, and it was what was included by the Democrats. So like, okay, yes, we're going to leave that in there, but is there anything that they may have taken out that would have looked even worse for Trump? Like, were there any emails from Jeffrey to Trump that may have been removed from the files? Like, it would be very easy to misplace 100 or 200 emails in a dump of 22,000. Just saying.
And importantly, 2 of the emails that were in there were some of the ones that the Democrats released, except they were unredacted in the GOP copy. And these lack of redactions are obviously very intentional. So we see first, I want you to realize the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. And then it says, Virginia spent hours at my house with him. Now that name is really important because it's Virginia Giuffre. She was the Prince Andrew accuser, but importantly, she did not accuse Trump, rather saying that he couldn't have been friendlier. This obviously is one of the main reasons the GOP appears to have released this, because in part, they're implying that, hey, if you release this redacted, people are going to speculate who this victim was, thinking that there was something that happened, but actually the person that's in there didn't accuse Trump of something illegal. And so this...
Here's the thing with that, because I've seen a lot of reporting on this, especially in the last few days. But the thing you have to think about this situation in general is, like, if you are Trump, and this is, I will admit, this is kind of a malicious interpretation of it, is like, if you are Trump, because she has said that, yeah, he was always nice and he couldn't have been nicer, and that she never saw him doing anything shady, is that you have to think about in the time that this was going on, right? So if Trump is being approached by the FBI or local police or whatever, he knows that Virginia Dufrey is being questioned or is a person of interest. So if you know that, and you're not a dumb person, what would you do? I again, putting myself in his shoes, I would be overtly nice to her and not try and do anything. Not interested. I'm not pressuring her to do anything. I'm not being creepy with her. I'm not trying to feel up on her. I'm literally just being a nice guy. Like, because if they talk to her and she speaks out about what happened, well, now you have reasonable doubt, right? Someone who was known to be trafficked by Jeffrey is saying that, no, Trump was a good guy. He was nice to me. He never did anything. I never saw him doing anything shady. But the thing you have to truly think about is that the amount of time that she was there being trafficked versus the entirety of how long Jeffrey Epstein had been doing this is just, it has to be a drop in the bucket. And the amount of properties that he had girls at. So, like, she may have just been on the island, but was she in New York? Was she at the ranch in New Mexico? Was she, like, all these other places that were also operating that Trump could have went to that she never saw him at? And or time frame. So he may not have been there while she was there, but there's a lot of other time on both ends of the spectrum that he could have been visiting and doing stuff with other girls. So once again, you just have to be very skeptical of what is the narrative that's being put out here? What do we have access to? Is it possible that, who's in power? Is it things could have been redacted or not released or whatever? And so those are just the types of things that you have to think about when you're trying to clear someone's good name, I guess, right? If you want to say they're innocent. Obviously, he's not innocent of nothing. There's a reason why he absolutely does not want this to come out and has been basically throwing up as many roadblocks as possible. But those are just, again, you could take the best faith interpretation and say, okay, what she said is fact, and yes, he never did anything creepy, or you just have to think about, okay, are there any holes or are there any ways that he could work around that happening And are there other things that he has done that would lead you to the conclusion that maybe that's what he was doing? So who knows? I don't know. I'm not claiming one way or the other. I'm just presenting a thought exercise to run yourself through to say if, hey, maybe there's more here than what is plainly written.
This is sort of the implication here with the Democrats saying, well, you're unredacting a victim's name. So that's been the battle there. Specifically, the second email, by the way, just further confirms it. It says blank worked at Mar-a-Lago. She was one of the ones that accused Prince Andrew. In the Democrat copy, all of that was redacted because, of course, it gives away the fact that we are talking about, once again, Virginia Giuffre. Also, in these emails released by the Republicans, it says blank worked at Mar-a-Lago. Trump knew of it, came to my house many times. He never got a massage. That's straight from Jeffrey Epstein clearing him of a massage, which obviously is the one person you most don't want to get a massage from. So honestly, that is good for him, which is obviously why they released it. Begging the question why they didn't release it sooner. Maybe it's because they didn't want.
And here's the thing, though. And this is why, again, yes, Jeffrey Epstein said that. Could he be covering for someone who was at the time his best friend? Could be. I don't know. So that is the thing. Once again, putting on your skeptic hat and saying, what are the motivations of the people involved? Or alternative, once again, giving the best interpretation of it, trying to play devil's advocate on this. It could be that, yes, he was not involved, but he knows a lot of people who are. And it's a lot of very powerful people like Peter Thiel, like Bill Clinton, like Bill Gates. There's just a lot of people in general. And so not just to protect them, right? Because he may not be on the best of terms with all of them, but also to protect himself. This is a take that I don't think I have seen many people providing, and I've said it before in Epstein videos, but just bears repeating here as the best faith interpretation, is that even if he's not trying to protect the people, he may be trying to protect himself and or his family. Because if Jeffrey Epstein was not only a Mossad agent, but also was working with CIA or these other people who are implicated, if it got brought to light what they have done in the past, and oh, by the way, Palantir is defense, like Trump being assassinated, attempted assassination 2 times that we know of, you don't think that's gonna spook him to some level? Like, he's a human being. That's gonna weigh a toll on you. And especially when you're seeing other high profile assassinations happen. Just saying, that could be a reason for him wanting to cover them up. Because if Jeffrey Epstein was also a CIA asset and they get exposed, and then the American public has mass outcry and says, yep, get rid of the CIA completely, or once again, if one of those powerful people get exposed and they have basically, any one of those parties has basically told Trump point blank, if you expose us, we will assassinate you. Once again, entirely possible. This is my best faith interpretation. Well, then he is going to fight tooth and nail to try and make sure that they do not get released. So once again, I can see both sides of the fence. Both are equally likely. And anyone that is telling you that they know, aside from someone who has seen tapes, like the only way that you would be able to for sure say is if you got to see the tapes of everything that has gone on there. You have seen that there are cameras everywhere, everything is well documented. If you knew that was the case and there are videos and you have seen them, that is the only way that you could definitively say that, hey, yes, this is what had occurred. And this, ABC person did XYZ. That is the only way you could actually know. And that is the thing, that is what is so interesting about all of this, is that at this point in time, we're just kind of guessing. But I can paint, this is why I like to bring it up and why I like to present my thoughts on it, is that I I can remove myself from the situation and say, okay, what is the worst case scenario thing? Like, why would he be doing this? And what is the best case scenario thing? And what I want to do is I want to present both of those sides to you, and you can make up your mind which one makes the most sense to you, or some shade of gray in the middle.
I want people to know that Trump knew about the girls. Now, one thing I want to talk about is the fact that Epstein is saying, hey, look, Trump publicly said that it was me that he asked to stop, but actually it was Ghislaine that he asked to stop. And my question here is, if it is Maxwell that was the one who poached Virginia Giuffre from Mar-a-Lago and then trafficked her, then why is she getting so much special treatment? I mean, that is the part where...
And that is a very good point, because this is where I kind of fall on the not so positive interpretations. Because it literally has been reported on in the past that Trump basically had them go through and pull out any mentions of where his name was in the files, like all the files that the Fed had on this. And so if they have done that and they have had a year to go in and clean up and pull out the more damning information. And the other thing too is that there are no videos that have been released. If you get Pam Bondi said there were thousands of hours, tens of thousands of hours of videos. Well, if that's true, who has them? Does her family have access to them? So once again, just because we haven't found anything super damning about Trump in this email release doesn't mean that there weren't other things that were done and she has dirt on him. And once again, because of that, that is what makes me think that it is, Trump is directly implicated, and that what has been released has been scrubbed of the more damning things about Trump, but there are people who still have access to information that could completely expose him.
The Republicans don't look good at all. I mean, what is going on with Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted sex offender, trying to get a pardon, getting Todd Blanche to give her a softball interview, and then she immediately gets preferential treatment. Look, we've been over the fact that she's at basically a special prison in Bryan, Texas, where normally someone of her status wouldn't be allowed to go to because it's too nice, it's too low security. But in addition to that, new reports are saying that top officials at Camp Bryan are sick of being Maxwell's bitch. Federal law enforcement staff working at the camp have been waiting on Maxwell hand and foot, including, by the way, reportedly she's been given a puppy as part of the preferential treatment she's been receiving. Overwhelmingly, Maxwell has been getting a super nice ride.
And that's another thing that I'm glad he calls out, because that has been a recent development. And the thing is, along with that, is like, what are we doing here? Like, she shouldn't even be in this camp to begin with, because the things that she has done, the trafficking of young children. And so that is exactly it. That is a huge problem. And the other thing too to call out is Trump has not out and out denied that he's thinking about pardoning her. He was asked about it directly and he just kind of skirted around the issue. He didn't want to talk about it, you could tell. And so that doesn't look good, especially in context of she's at Club Fed. She shouldn't be there in the first place. She now has a puppy that she's allowed to train, but not like, okay, no, it's not really what's going on here, I bet. She just wanted a companion. She gets other special privileges as well. She can go out when everyone else is inside for the night or whatever. And so, yeah, when that kind of stuff is happening, it is concerning to say the least.
All of this of course makes us all wonder, once again, what do they have on Trump? I mean, why treat her like this if she doesn't have something compromising in all of that? It just kind of begs some questions you probably don't want to ask. Also very suspicious is the fact that immediately after this report came out, Trump personally called Rep. Lauren Boebert, urging her to withdraw support for releasing the Epstein files. Bondi, Blanche, and Patel were going to meet today about the Epstein files. This, of course, is furthering the idea the White House has no interest in this story. I think Trump tweeted multiple times today about the Epstein hoax. Again, we've heard that a million times.
And that's the thing. That's the exact thing, too, is that when they're being so transparent about trying to block and obstruct as much as humanly possible. That is why I fall on the side of the less favorable interpretation, because they are basically pulling out all the stops to say, do not cross the line, do not vote to release this, like throwing a hissy fit about this. And the more you see them squirm and twist in the wind, the more you just have to give them the least favorable interpretation of why they are doing that.
The question is, why are you acting so suspicious if you have nothing to hide, right? If you didn't get the massage, which Epstein says, what are you hiding? Why are you so worried about all this stuff coming out? By the way, Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt was actually asked about the White House pressuring people to get them not to sign for the release of the Epstein files, and her response was pretty insane.
Why are White House officials then meeting with Representative Boebert in an effort to try and get her to not sign this petition calling for the release of the files?
Doesn't it show transparency that members of the Trump administration are willing to brief members of Congress whenever they please? Doesn't that show our level of transparency? Doesn't that show the level of transparency when we are willing to sit down with members of Congress and address their concerns?
It shows
no, because you've been stonewalling it the entire time, and true transparency would be if you just released them all to begin with. So no, I don't think it shows any level of transparency, and I just have to say, I was never really a huge fan of hers just when she started, but the more she just, it's her job, right, to run cover for the administration, but every single time I hear her talk, she just, I can't, it's like, at this point in time, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me, and she always seemed kind of indignant and whatever. And I guess it's kind of reassuring that she isn't a complete buffoon like the previous person who held the position. But she seems so snake-like and indignant and pompous. And every time I hear her talk, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. I cannot stand listening to her.
Transparency to try to go and block files being released on the world's most prolific but the fact we know about it, that's the transparent part. It's just insane. That's the kind of spin we've expected with this story all along. That's been part of what's been so frustrating about all of this. So look, I want to get back to this story because there's so many people involved here. We're just going to go through one by one. Look, it's a lot more than just Trump. Like, one person that got kind of a weird stray in all of this was the fact that Epstein talked about Hillary doing naughties with Vince. Vince being Vince Foster, a White House counsel. There was a rumor about Clinton and Vince having some kind of affair, and then later Vince was found dead of suicide. And this is where we see Jeffrey Epstein and Michael Wolff's kind of symbiotic.
Clinton body count apparently does not just apply to people who have met an unfortunate end who surround the Clintons. It also implicates people Hillary has slept with. Maybe this is why she never left Bill and or had him done in, because monkey see, monkey do. She's just mad it came out publicly. I don't know. But anyway, I just found that funny and couldn't have happened to a nicer person, in my opinion, for this to come back around to light.
Relationship. Michael Wolff is a journalist who has been prolific in all of this. Well, I struggle to call him a journalist, actually, because as what we'll find, he was more like a PR guy for Epstein. But he was actually asking Epstein and using Epstein for a lot of access to information, because Michael Wolff actually told Jeffrey Epstein, hey, basically, I'm interviewing him this afternoon. Anything you think I should ask? And he's talking about Trump. Epstein replies, do you want to be provocative? Michael Wolff says, job is to get the hard ones in without being ejected from the room. What's the one that pierces through? Jeffrey Epstein basically says, hey, you can do this softball. That's a Hillary problem. He would smile, and then you can ask about his relationship with the electricians union and Mar-a-Lago, and out you go. Obviously hinting to the idea that he's going to get kicked out if he asks about more sensitive subjects. Michael Wolff asks about, hey, what's up with Foster? And then he describes what that's all about. And this brings us to Michael Wolff, who I want to spend a little bit of time here on. Although some of you may not know as much about him, you may be less interested in him. I think he's one of sort of the worst looking people in all of this. Actually, after reading these emails, he may be the most disgusting person that comes out of that. And that's saying a lot given what's in here. But I want to just show you this because actually the Democrats initially released was this idea was that Michael Wolff and Epstein were basically planning how to respond to Epstein being brought up in the context of Trump. Michael Wolff says, I hear CNN is planning to ask Trump about his relationship with you, either on air or in Scrum afterwards. Epstein says, if we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be? That being interesting because it's like, wait, were they in touch with Trump at this time? Because Trump denied being in contact with Epstein basically since early 2000s. But anyway, if he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you valuable PR or political currency. You can hang him in a way that generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him generating a debt. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey's a good guy that's gotten a raw deal and is victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in the Trump regime. Now, if it...
And here's the big takeaway from it. Yes, he seems to be very scummy, and they're talking about it behind the scenes. And if you're a journalist, it should be your journalistic duty, your integrity, to come out with any information that you know. It seems like this journalist was fully comprised of everything that Jeffrey Epstein did, which, if you have not already lost all faith in the traditional journalism, this should be the final nail in that coffin. Because I think a lot of us have known for quite some time, but this is just another burning example of it. The traditional media is bought and paid for completely. Once again, any self-respecting journalist, real journalist, knowing what Jeffrey Epstein is up to, obviously he did here, should be reporting on that. Not trying to work behind the scenes and be buddy-buddy and get additional information and run smear campaigns and try and figure... Like, that's not journalism. That's literally propaganda. So, yes, once again, you cannot have any faith in traditional journalism. If you're watching a CNN or an MSNBC or a Fox News, like, these are all paid propagandists. Find another news source.
It doesn't sound like PR. It might be sounding like blackmail to you. It's like kind of a little bit of both. Michael Wolff is basically conspiring to generate a debt for Jeffrey Epstein from Trump, who is about to become the most powerful person on the planet. So that's really bizarre because Michael Wolff has positioned himself as sort of this truth teller about Jeffrey Epstein and he's got all these tapes that he's going to release showing how close Trump and Epstein were. But it's like behind the scenes, he was actually kind of running PR for Epstein, which is sort of the worst thing you could have ever done. This is in 2016. Michael Wolff is talking to Epstein about a Patterson book, which later becomes the James Patterson Filthy Rich book. He says basically that would present some time issues if it was released too early. You would not be able to do a competing book or documentary before then. That's not to say it shouldn't be pursued. In a sense, better to know what Patterson's position is and a year from now be able to counter it. In 2016, he's playing like PR, I'm going to fix your reputation, Jeffrey Epstein. He then says, that being said, if you need an immediate counter to the book, I believe Trump offers an ideal opportunity. It's a chance to make the story about something other than you while at the same time letting you frame your own story. Also, becoming an anti-Trump voice gives you a certain political cover, which you decidedly don't have now. And so again, we get the idea of him kind of...
And once again, on that, okay, what side of the fence do I fall on? What would he have that would make him be able to expose Trump in an anti-Trump manner? I don't think it's that he was just hanging out and they were buddies. again, that's why I fall on the maliciousness side of the fence more than the optimist. But again, once again, another example of something that pushes me in that direction. And there's a lot more that pushes me in that way than the alternative.
Scheming to get Epstein cover, which is so bad because now Michael Wolff is like, oh, we're the guy exposing Trump's connections to Epstein. It's like, buddy, what are your connections to Epstein? Then we have later them discussing a lawsuit against Epstein and Donald Trump with a woman claiming that she was raped. Michael Wolff responds, well, I guess if there's anyone who can wave this away, it's Donald. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Again, why are you trying to do something for a man accused of these things? It really seems like Michael Wolff was kind of running cover here. Now, I also want to talk about the Prince Andrew Trump scandal that appears to have been brewing here, or at least is implied in the emails. You may see some people say that Epstein met Trump and Prince Andrew back in 2019, which of course would be well after Trump said they had no contact, which would be bad news for Trump. In fact, there's a few things in here which suggest that Epstein had contact with Trump. Of course, we don't know for sure. I'll just present you the evidence we do have. So this is back in 2019, June 3rd. They're talking about London real estate, about how financials are going to leave. Then Epstein says, once they are gone, the monarchy is dependable, saying Prince Andrew and Trump today, too funny. And this is actually the same day that Trump and Andrew are spotted in London, of course, meeting together. Jeffrey Epstein says, recall Prince Andrew's accuser came out of Mar-a-Lago, Virginia Giuffre. Then we have a sender that's blacked out, but I think there's strong evidence that it's Steve Bannon, by the way, just to give you some context. They say, can't believe nobody is making you the connective tissue. So the connective tissue between these two being Epstein. And then Epstein replies, F&B only. Now later, Jeffrey Epstein says, report from London. Donald now thinks he's king. Ivanka a princess. He doesn't need advisors. Bannon says, yep, London trip not good. He had a gleam in his eye. Of course, this hinting at the idea that Epstein was there. If he got a...
And yeah, that's where I think it becomes apparent that this is Bannon, is because he was his advisor during the first term, right? So yeah, this is where it kind of seems like they're clashing a little bit at the end, because this is 2019, so this would be towards the end of his first term. So yes, that is just, I think, where it becomes apparent that yes, this is Bannon.
Report from London, if he's talking about Prince Andrew and Trump, or that's how people are coming to that conclusion at least. And then we have the thread that makes us know this is Steve Bannon, which is he gives a link where it says Steve Bannon believes Trump obstructed justice. Michael Wolff says, he says BBC crushed him, he should give it up. The book.
And this is where, okay, what's the connective tissue now between, we were just talking about Michael Wolff, and now Steve Bannon is using his reporting. So it kind of feels like Steve Bannon is... There should be some questions for him coming out of this as well. I mean, I think there was some... If you were truly diving deep on it and paying attention, there were some things that were pointing towards him in the first place. But now that this is all coming out, and I'm sure there's going to be more of it, well, by the way... more questions. Now there's going to be an intensification, I think, of a magnifying glass on Steve Bannon, whereas he could kind of keep this at an arm's length before. Now you're not looking quite so good.
Book is going to be a stiff. I don't know if he senses that. Epstein replies, unfortunately, I do know his comments have encouraged some to look to you for answers. This all being about an article about Steve Bannon, obviously. And then Steve Bannon says, Burke says, I have zero to worry about. Now, if you don't know who Burke is, he's a lawyer who previously defended Steve Bannon. Epstein then replies, good but unnecessary. Should I call Michael Wolff? Bannon says, what are you going to say to him? He's a wild animal caught in a trap. Epstein says, catch his breath. Bannon says, tell him to lay off me. It's both not working and not helping. Okay, done. Again, this is all in the context of Michael Wolff talking about Steve Bannon, and then he says, hey, tell him to back off. This is furthering the idea that Epstein, Bannon, Michael Wolff, they all had a close relationship, which is mostly public knowledge, but we see exactly how close. Now, in addition to this, I also wanted to note this very strange interaction between these two, where Epstein sends a news article about George Nader being basically caught up in some child pornography charges, and then Bannon says, not cool. Epstein, mandatory minimum 15. Bannon says MBZ must have coughed him up. How did he get extradited? Could have stayed in UAE forever. Epstein says he was not extradited. He was duped. Bannon, WTF. Epstein, there is his bail hearing today, currently in Brooklyn. Doesn't look good, pre-trial detention. Now, I personally found it strange that they were so concerned about the fate of someone caught up in such horrible charges. We'll also talk about the Thanksgiving message. This one got a lot of attention.
It's so ironic because you wonder, why is Steve Bannon so concerned about that? I mean, Epstein, obviously, you would know why he is concerned about it because it is proven that that's what he did. But why does Steve Bannon care? I'll leave you to your own conclusions.
Which is that Epstein was going to Thanksgiving and he was asked, where are you having Thanksgiving? He says, Eva. This lady, Faith Cates, replies, he's such a snooze. Who else is down there? He replies, David Fizzle, Hansen, Trump. And once again, Trump claims that he was not in contact with Jeffrey Epstein after the early 2000s. He said, hey, I cut him off. I realized he was a bad guy. And if Epstein's having Thanksgiving with him, that's obviously a problem. Now, I don't have any public confirmation.
And so once again, to play devil's advocate on this point, number one, on the devil's side, if true, he is having Thanksgiving with him after he has been elected. Because if you look at the year, it was 2017. So he gets elected and then he's there for Thanksgiving. So this is after he's president. So this is very recent, relatively, to when Epstein was put in jail and then you know what happened from there. Very damning, to say the least. But then on the angel side, again, the favorable interpretation here is, I had this point made, which I thought was a good one, is that the problem with this, yes, he was claiming it, Jeffrey was claiming it directly that Trump was there, but it would be very hard, because of Secret Service, it would be very hard for Trump to have went there without a lot of people knowing it. So it would be interesting if we got some sort of secondary confirmation aside from what Jeffrey said. Because it may have just been a joke, or it may have been whatever. So, yes, he said it, but then it may not have been true because it would have had to have been cleared and people would have known, and, you know, the flight logs and all this kind of stuff. So there would have been some sort of, hey, here's what actually happened. Yes, he was there. It would be very easy to confirm or deny that claim. But then, just logically thinking through it, you have to also apply that to, and like I said, I already gave it as an example of the, you know, devil's advocate that he may have been lying. But if he's lying about this, if you say, okay, yes, Jeffrey was lying, he wasn't actually there, you have to also say he could have been lying about Trump never getting a massage. I'm just saying, to be consistently, ideologically consistent, if you say Jeffrey Epstein is capable of lying about Trump being at Thanksgiving, you have to also admit that he could have been lying about Trump never getting a massage. And vice versa. So Trump is spending Thanksgiving with a convicted child molester and trafficker while he was president, because you don't think Jeffrey would lie, well, then he wasn't lying about Trump never getting a massage. I'm just saying, if you want to be ideologically consistent, or you can be in the middle and say, I don't really know, he could be lying about one and not the other, but you have to admit, at the very least, if you want to stonewall and say Trump could never do that, and I don't think Jeffrey would lie about that, well then he also wouldn't lie, you wouldn't lie about him being at Thanksgiving. So you have to stay ideologically consistent. Don't twist yourselves into knots, into pretzels for someone who does not care about you in the least.
for that outside of these emails, which are basically talking about it, implying it. Once again, the same is true of Prince Andrew. Do you actually think these emails are about him actually seeing them, or is he just reporting on it? It's kind of hard to know, but I just want you to know what's out there. You also should know about the foreign governments that Epstein was working with. In one email, you have Jeffrey Epstein talking about advising a Russian ambassador. He says, Churkin was great. He understood Trump after our conversations. It's not complex. And Churkin was a Russian ambassador at the time until he died. And then you also have Israel. There are a bunch of public reports about Israel being implicated with Epstein, how spies stayed with him at the time, and some of them even met at Epstein's house. And then you also have some emails between Epstein and a UAE royal, a sultan. So Epstein was rubbing shoulders with the top cream of the crop of our society. I mean, I don't think that should come as a shock. We should also probably talk about Larry Summers. He was in an article, Mogul Donor Gives Harvard More Than Money. And then he is in emails with Larry Summers, where Epstein tells him, when we meet, I will endeavor to mesmerize you with stories of DC. So wild. And then Larry Summers said, I am trying to figure out why American elite think if you murder your baby by beating and abandonment, it must be irrelevant to your admission at Harvard, but hit on a few women 10 years ago and can't work at a network or think tank. Do not repeat this insight. Oops. Now everybody has it. So there you go. I mean, that's a high-level snapshot of what we saw in this release. Lots of people being implicated in one way or another. It's quite varied. I mean, some people you find out they've been playing a journalist but have been secretly running PR cover for Epstein, like well after, you kind of knew he was implicated in a lot of this stuff. Other people like Clinton are catching strays on, affairs that they were having. Trump gets a mixed bag where initially the implication that he was kind of given was revealed to be not quite correct because they're talking about Virginia Giuffre, although it still is a mystery why he's behaving so strangely regarding Ghislaine Maxwell.
And you just have to think about, if you were friends with him and or knew him and were you were making jokes about it, right? Especially given what time this is happening. You could make jokes like, oh yeah, he never... that's the thing about these emails, is you don't really get tone. You can't pick up on, okay, this is said between two people that know that he obviously did receive massages, so haha, yeah, he never got massages. Again, the emails, how short they are, it's very hard to glean any sort of context from them.
Why he's trying extensively to block the Epstein files. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. Instead, I just want to break down what we do know so far. As always, we've all been just looking to get to the end of this thing so we can all move on. It's been amazing how slow they have dripped this thing out. I mean, they have been slow rolling it this whole time, so I will update you when we have more.
The other thing that I find hilarious about this situation is, and you can go back and look, or you can look at other people as they cover it, as they start rolling out additional emails. How awful is the spelling associated with all these people? You would think that people who have gotten to certain levels of power and influence are actually intelligent. And I think this just proves to me that it has nothing to do with intelligence. A lot of it is, how corrupt are you willing to be? And how underhanded and what tactics are you willing to use? Because you can randomly pull any one of these emails and go back and look at them. The misspellings are A, rampant, and B, horrendous. You kind of have to guess what they are saying in some spaces. And again, to me, it just seems kind of baffling, because you, once again, would think anyone who has gotten to these levels are intelligent, and maybe they're just so intelligent that they just don't care about proper grammar and spelling anymore. But confusing to me, to say the least. All right, and that will about do it. I did just want to cover it, though, because there are very interesting things that have come out of this already. I've said it before, it's one of the things that I think is very important. I think it does need to be covered as much as possible. I'm sure there will be additional releases as these 22,000 emails are being dug through, so fully expect we will find out more. We will find out more interesting things, but this was just kind of the first wave of what was coming out. And just the thing I'll say about the slow roll component of it is it literally, their hand was forced. That's the thing, is they either, because again, it's a mutually assured destruction. So if you say, okay, we release something negative about Trump, well, they're just showing, and that's why I think they dropped all the emails, probably scrubbed, is that they can then go, oh yeah, well then it's on, and we have all this information too. And so I think that's just the world that we find ourselves in. That's probably the best world for anyone who actually cares about this story and is intellectually honest and says, hey, I'd like to know if there's a bunch of people who are taking advantage of children running our country. I would like them all to get exposed, and ideally something actually happens for once. Because again, if you can't, I've said this before, because I think if there is a line in the sand that we as the American people should be able to draw, it's that we cannot allow people to take such depraved actions and remain in polite society. I'm sorry, you gotta go. Like, you can't be running companies, you can't be in charge of the free world, you can't hold positions of power if you have went and taken advantage of children and ruined children's lives. Like, is that not something that we can all agree on? So I think it's just something that's very important, and that's why I care about it. I think you should care about it. That's why I'm, once again, going to continue covering this. Hopefully, again, mutually assured destruction forces someone's hand, or the bad look of trying to stand against it becomes politically toxic and it has to come out regardless. Anyway, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this from me, drop me a subscription below. It really does help the channel grow. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.